Hey there, welcome to episode 50 of the Quaggling Sand audio program. I am your host, Dan Hugo. We are recording this at just before 1 p.m. on Wednesday, October 23rd, 2024 here in Vegas, where it is basically like spring, even though we're supposed to be autumnal at this point. But we'll see how the weather goes, what the continuing saga of me trying to speak into a microphone. But yes, the October 23, 2024 edition of Quaggling Sand, episode 50. In case you're curious, if you've never heard me tell you this before, quaggling sand is a term I coined when I was very young. Single digits, probably maybe in kindergarten, probably before. You would call it pins and needles. Pins and needles. The return of circulation to a limb, which you may have been sitting on or was otherwise constricted. Quaggling Sand. It's mostly a vanity storytelling program, but the possibility of having a guest on to compare notes on relevant stories. Maybe we have a topic that we both share, and someone would like to come on and share a story in kind. Always a possibility. For the most part, though, solo. Here we go. Wherever you found this audio program, hopefully you are able to see the episode description, which contains the show notes. I will read the summary of the show notes, and there are only 4 links for today's episode, and 2 of them are the usual shameless self-promotion. The summary is this. There was a time... Oh, by the way, the title of today's episode is Being Online. Being Online. Summary. There was a time when being online was some ethereal notion, like a physical journey to a mysterious land, requiring a noisy modem and a second phone line even, not to mention a phone number to call. You may not even know what I'm talking about. Such a journey to reach our always-on present. Such a journey. Our always-on present is one that almost certainly you are aware of. You almost certainly, statistically, have at least one mobile phone with some sort of internet access. There was a time when that would have been unthinkable. What is that? I was there for that. A lot of people were. The links for today's episode include, like I said, the 2 shameless self-promotion links, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo. You are under no obligation to spend any money at either. I do use the buymeacoffee.com profile page to have links to my various projects and audio programs and productions and my favorite coffee beans, some other stuff. So basically it's a externally managed profile landing page with some other stuff. And I should put that to more use when my to-do list is a little bit, is fewer pages, fewer pages in length. Ko-fi.com, I have not posted the things that I was thinking about posting by way of sort of announcing a couple of things that we're rolling out on the Innovative Vegas side. So I have, again, pages and pages of to-do. If only I could be online more. And then 2 links that are relevant. They're not essential. One is a Wikipedia page about modem. The modem term, you may have heard it before. Strangely enough, you're using one, probably right now. If you use a mobile phone, they have modems in them. Modem, modulator, demodulator. They don't do quite the same thing anymore with digital communication. Mostly a modem was modulating and demodulating quadrature amplitude modulation, quadrature phase shift keying, signaling to put data bits in the bandwidth, the spectrum available on a phone line or similar. But it's generally used now to interface data. So the data side, the keys, the sounds, the video, pictures, and to put them in a form to, that happens somewhere else, but to take the signals associated with those and to put them into the communication channel, whether it's mobile data, Ethernet at this point, even though Ethernet is Mac and Phi, I know. But the take home is you'll hear modem used as a more generic term than it was. But the modem itself was most definitely instrumental in being online in the early days. And a BBS is a term we never hear anymore. Bulletin board system. Wikipedia page about that. BBSs were the things you could call with your modem. Nowadays, we have Facebook or Slack or Discord or any number of things that sort of mimic the bulletin board system. Reddit is even sort of an online forum, very similar. So all these notions that you think today might have been radical inventions worth billions and billions of dollars, the technologies and the developments themselves, not really that new. It's what they do with you that makes them worth so much. Creepy. So first, the computer. I used to do just about anything to have access to a computer, to any computer, to computers, plural. I've spoken about this previously regarding Pascal on the VAX at Grand Canyon Community College with a blind student, the Apple II Plus in the library, production by Street, the Apple II Plus in the library at the junior high school I attended. There were several, so I've talked about that before. I was basically voraciously enamored by computer technology of any kind. I used to read just about everything I could get my hands on, especially about computers, but just in general too. I've spoken about this previously. I believe that episode was Meet Me at the Library. But in general, I've always been consuming words, pictures too, video, but words certainly, since I learned to read, probably right around the time I coined the term quaggling sand. I cannot verify that at this time. My parents would get us an Apple IIe. My sister and myself, they used it occasionally, but I don't think enough, to be honest. In around 1985, I was just entering high school, so we had a computer in the home, no modem. The SIG, which I think is hard to come by, certainly by that name in modern times. It's an acronym we don't hear so often, but Special Interest Groups, SIGs, used to be a thing. Now they're probably Facebook pages, or meetup.com has meetup groups. And so sometimes they are virtual, sometimes they're asynchronous, like Facebook pages. You can post things and you can share information. You don't have to be there at the same time. Meetup groups, virtual or in real life, are more synchronous, like you're supposed to be there. You're supposed to be at a place or in your favorite video chat platform, conference calling platform, if you like, at the same time. So there are special interest groups that can be asynchronous and they can be synchronous. Meetup is an awful website, so I'm not endorsing that. But these are all SIGs in some form. And even, which I'll talk about shortly, the notion of Facebook pages were realized back in the day in a BBS, a bulletin board system. You would visit a bulletin board by dialing its phone number and using your modem in your computer. And you could post something, you could read something, you could make a comment, you could download it, whatever it was. There was a whole collection of activities you could do, and then someone else could dial in at another time, especially if the BBS only had one phone number. So you had a little bit of an etiquette thing. You dial in, you do your thing, you get off. Let somebody else do their thing. So Facebook Pages is a glorified BBS when you think about it. Probably overvalued. I was making my way I was making my way to the Arizona Desert Apple Menagerie meetups back in the day. I didn't have a car yet, so I had to get to places, catching rides and so on. So I was making my way, and the Arizona Desert Apple Menagerie, Atom, it actually had square brackets like the Apple II, so it was Atom 2. Those were really, really interesting, and I was at the time probably, I think I was in junior high or maybe initial high school, so figure I was 13, 14, 15, hanging out with adults, but there was no issue with that. It was public meetings, like we would meet in a public place, a computer store or whatever, and there would be guest speakers and there would be other people that would bring their kids, but it was mostly just me. My parents, again, probably did not use our computer in those early days enough, but luckily those were the early times, a little bit more, the latchkey kid phase of human development. So not too unusual. So I would attend these meetings. I would meet people, talk to computer nerds like myself, learn about other computer nerds and other computer nerd activities. And then later, they would rename themselves to the Arizona Apple User Group, which was probably more, we'll say, compatible with the special interest group notion. So like more easily identified as a business and what they were doing. An Apple menagerie may have sounded like something else entirely. An orchard group of some sort. Right. So they continued to be a proactive member of the overall Apple fan population locally in the Phoenix area and beyond, with meetups and participation in shows and conventions, and even growing the organization, if you will. I mean, it was an actual entity. I think I don't know if they were a nonprofit. It's been a while. But they formed ASBUG, which was a business user group for, I think they were still focused on Apple. But so they formed an early, hey, you're using computers in your business. Well, let's gather and chat about things and we can all learn from each other and so on. And they too had a BBS, of course. So bulletin board that you could dial into and share information. Occasionally someone would mention another relevant gathering or project or so on. So early days. And I've pointed this out. Part of the value proposition was, I'm going to add this to my notes since I left off something here. So part of the proposition was your special interest groups, you're meeting with people that have similar special interests. And so one of the benefits of this was you could share information at scale, right? You could get the word out. You didn't necessarily have to live in Phoenix. You probably didn't even have to be a member per se of the Arizona Apple Users Group. You could share information on the BBS. You could learn information. There were ways to purchase archives of articles from magazines, and there was all kinds of stuff. It was very grassroots, very bottom up. And then later FidoNet would come along, and there would be ways to connect BBSs to each other and share information and forward posts and so on. And then, Usenet News had a similar model of peering. But anyway, so one of the people I met probably in the Atom days, actually owned a company in Tempe, Arizona. So a bit of a drive. I remember my mom drove me out there because I didn't have a car. We had just gotten our Apple IIe. The Apple IIe famously had a expansion slot, a special slot. And it turns out this guy who I'd known for a while, I mean, I'd known him for more than 10 minutes, for months maybe, I don't know, various meetups and so on, had a company called Checkmate Technologies in Tempe, Arizona, and they made an adapter card that would fit that expansion slot in the IIe that had a megabyte of memory. So you could expand the memory of your Apple IIe using bank switching, of course. The 6502 was still limited as it was, but a 1 megabyte Checkmate Technologies card. And then, so we got a discount being members of the users group. So that was cool, right? So membership has its privileges. And then he said, hey, for anybody, like he said it to, so here you have that personal connection. Hey, anybody here who is interested, we ship the board with classic green timings, I guess would be the case for an analog monitor. So because the device was also the video card, so you could connect your monitor to the expansion card with memory and video display. So he said, anybody here who would like to change, like if you want an amber or some other color, so amber was also pretty popular, you come on down and I'll switch the chips out for free and you can change the color as you like. So here you had a direct engagement with someone who obviously had the similar, arguably same in some cases, interests, directly related to the industry that you're interested in and so on. So shot down there, switched out the green for the amber, and I was a fan of amber ever since. And when you think about it, right now on my Linux desktop, I have many windows open, and my terminal windows for command line chicanery are usually like a gray on black, but I do have the classic terminal program, and if you're not familiar, you're missing out. Classic terminal? I can't remember the name of it. It's an application for Linux and maybe the Mac, and it displays your terminal window as though it's an old phosphor screen, so a CRT, cathode ray tube, and you can have it display it in different colors, and there will be different scan line artifacts and so on. So it's just like looking at a classic monitor. Oh, I think it's called Cool. Yeah, Cool Retro Term, if you're curious. So Cool Retro Term, and I do have the default as a scanning, slightly curved, so there's a little bit of barrel distortion. Amber command line. Cool Retro Term, if you're looking for that. Probably not. Anyway, so yeah, that was part of the value proposition of going online, so making that journey to be online in this weird place, a BBS or whatever, and then to actually meet with people in person, which I will get to more in a moment. So, but I still didn't have a modem. So this was very early days when I had entered high school. I was a freshman, so I was 14. No car, no job. Got a job at McDonald's in Metro Center Mall, making $3.35 an hour, minimum wage. One could, so after reading, shopping, and pining away for quite some time, and of course having my job at McDonald's, like I just described, I saved up enough, very, very slowly. By the way, this is another thing that I learned recently, I think because of like anti-terrorism laws and whatnot. But when I was working at McDonald's, I was under 16. Don't tell anyone, because I faked my birth certificate so I could work in the grill under 16. But I think I was 15. And I opened a bank account at the bank in the mall it was directly downstairs from McDonald's. I think it was Mira Bank. I didn't really have to do anything special. I opened an account and I put my paychecks in, and then I could pop out money from the ATM. No problem. Simpler times. I also had a Volkswagen without seatbelts, and it ran on regular leaded gasoline. So as luck would have it, Hayes, so I'd saved up a sufficient amount of money to do this. And Hayes, the main name, the Hayes compatible AT command set, if you've ever heard of such a thing, Hayes launched their 2400 baud modem. Baud is symbols per time, so symbols per second. 2400 symbols per second, twice as many symbols as the old 1200 baud modems, which meant their price came down nicely. I got my Mitsuba 1200 baud modem, probably like $150 or something ridiculous. I think Hayes modems, 2400 baud modems, were going for hundreds of dollars, maybe 500-ish. I mean, they were cutting edge. So I got my modem, and it was off to the races. After a quick rundown on how to set it up, half versus full duplex, stop bits, 7N1, 8N1, and whatnot, I was dialing into the Arizona Apple Users Group BBS, and that was only the beginning. Later, I would learn about dialing telnet numbers, accessing different services, some other things I will get into shortly as well. So phone lines were a thing back in the day, and dealing with phone lines in general inserted some pause into our online life for casual people, like normal mortals, especially living with their parents and a family with one phone line. So one could use their main or perhaps only phone line to go online, put that in quotes, go online. I'm going to go online. But there would always be some inconvenience there. Someone picking up an extension maybe, hearing those modem tones, and what is this? I got to call somebody. An incoming call, if one had call waiting especially, was a problem. Generally introducing a hiccup in the normal household flow of sharing the one phone resource. So, quite possibly the extension phone, right? If you have one phone line but more than one phone, it was the root of all evil for us modem kids. And you could disable call waiting, but you could not prevent mom from picking up that phone. And then of course, the requisite, Mom, I'm online. A second phone line was essential. No features, no call waiting, no nothing. Just a straight phone line, as cheap as possible, but as long as it worked. By the way, later when DSL became a thing, we would learn that, homes that were wired for a single phone line got a second phone line using something called a Daimler, which would shift the second phone line into a higher part of the spectrum, the voice spectrum, that could be carried by a copper pair, twisted pair wire, back to the switching station onto the home office, whatever. So domlers and DSL do not go together. And that was, I think that's something I talked about previously. But yeah, having the second phone line for the purposes of dial-up modems was essential. This is something nearly zero of today's youth, maybe millennials, but certainly Gen Z will appreciate, of course. Zero of you get this. You have your own phone line in your pocket all the time. You don't have to worry about shared phone lines. Occasionally in the modern era, someone will be using a point of sale terminal with a credit card processing device, and it will have a modem in it. So they'll have it attached to a phone line. And if they use the retail phone number, if they share the phone line and you pick up, somehow you end up hearing the modem tones, or it's kind of sound like a psh, 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 psh. So not the connect tones. Those are handshake tones. People may have heard those. They're more weird sounding, but when data is being transmitted, it sounds like white noise, and it kind of is. It's a distribution, not quite Gaussian, but there you go. So you had to have a second phone line. Since phone lines were not always immediately growing in number at the snap of fingers, like you couldn't just say, give me a third, fourth, fifth phone line. There was a certain amount of pause, patience, and pondering when it came to dialing out to the BBS or wherever, whether one or many. You might have a whole list of the rounds, making the rounds, dialing your favorite 10 or 15 or whatever, or one, connecting to these things to read, download, post, and so on. And as I mentioned, the etiquette was kind of both ways, because if I'm running a BBS on my second phone line, but I have one phone line, then when you dial in from your one phone line, and you dial into my one secondary phone line dedicated to the BBS, not only can I not dial out because I'm using my phone line to be always available for people to dial in, but I only have the one phone line so that two people cannot dial in. So the resource sharing became a matter of etiquette, a matter of sort of family ethics. Like, don't hog the phone line. But having a second phone line for dialing out was convenient, certainly. Probably saved many families from fisticuffs. But if you were going to do anything with your computer regarding hosting a BBS or hosting anything or having some people dial in, you really needed to have 3, 4, 5 phone lines. And by the way, the BBSs that had multiple phone lines would get a little bit of extra attention, because like you could actually have live chats where you could chat with the sysop, the system operator, the BBS sysop. So if you were doing something and you had a question, you might be able to ping them and they could come in and chat with you live. And that was certainly the beginning of where we are today in some way. So yeah, you often had to plan. I didn't have those as a P word. Pause, patience, pondering. So pondering is like planning, right? You had to ponder, what do I need to do tonight? I need to call these different phone numbers. I need to see if someone responded to my question. I need to answer some questions. I need to download the latest article about whatever. I need to upload some information, whatever. You're doing your due diligence and your participation in different communities and so on. So all of this you had to manage in the midst of phone line sharing, limited bandwidth, the possibility that the other phone might be busy. People don't know what busy means. It's when someone's using the phone and you hear a busy signal, kind of a I don't know. If you search the internet, by the way, there are archives of phone noises from time immemorial. So you can hear operators or directory assistants, not information. You don't call for information. So that's, phone lines. What a classic time that was. Pagers and free long distance is where my head went. I've covered this before as well. So very briefly, the digital pager was a thing for quite some time. You can still get them today. We will not discuss how they could be misused for the purposes of killing people. Where initially you could receive additional digits. Well, you could receive the phone number. There was no caller ID back in those days. So someone could enter their phone number. Now, the original pagers would literally just beep, the beeper. So it would usually be a calling service. You'd get a page, you'd call your number, and they would say, oh, yes, Mr. Hugo, you got a call from so-and-so. And they would give you the message. So those were actually more secure in a way. But once you could send someone digital digits, right, digital information, and it would reach their pocket or their belt loop or whatever, once you could do that without any sort of governance, nobody was checking anything, the sky was the limit. I could send you my phone number. I could add a special code like a 911, like, hey, call me back, urgent. Some other code numbers, or you could call a number and then put your personal code, like, oh, I'm calling from a payphone, but it's me. So here's the payphone number, but it's, whatever DAN would be encoded as. So, okay. And then so you'd have these little groups of pager friends, right? You can call each other on your pagers and whatnot. So mostly it came down to having a caller provided phone number, right? So there was no caller ID. So somebody would put in a phone number that you were intended to call back. They didn't have to put in their own phone number or any phone number that was even connected to them. And then the person receiving the call could go one of a couple of different ways. And I actually I interrogated actual pager owners. I said, hey, if you have a phone number, if somebody's calling you and you have a phone number and you don't know the number, do you still call them? And they're like, yeah, it could be important. It could be someone who, any number of reasons, business related, or, maybe they only had limited access to the phone, whatever it was, whatever the reasoning was. Like most of the time, an incoming pager page with a phone number would get a callback. Usually it was something along the lines of, hi, this is Dan. Did you page me? You paged me from this number, etc. I got a page from this number, etc. So there was a little bit more etiquette there, a little bit of protocol about returning a phone call from an unknown number. Now we never do that ever, right? Don't even pick up. Possible spam. So that was the thing. And then there was a time when sprint codes were a thing in a post-blue box era. And if you don't know what a blue box is, you must do some research on Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak and how they first made money in that initial joint venture, such that one could have a long-distance number and a PIN code. That is, you would call 1-800 back then, 1-800, sprint call or whatever. And then you enter your PIN code, and you could call for free from a payphone, from a hotel, or from generally, if you're away from home or your business, so you could bill the call to your account. So you wouldn't have to pay, find a dime for your payphone. I know you were thinking quarter, but this is a long time ago. So you could pay for your calls and whatnot. And it would also, it would be routed through the number. So even though 800 numbers were audited, I mean, they could be connected to a call-in number, like kind of like a precursor to caller ID. At scale, that was nearly impossible to do. So it turns out that if somebody misused your Sprint number, they would just give you a new PIN code. They would eat the cost. You're talking pennies, dollars, small dollars. So still convenient though. So if a third party somehow acquired your calling and PIN code information, we called those free phone calls. So it turns out if you have one modem, or if you had one modem and a dedicated phone line, so you could have it working for you all day, and some patience, and if you could write a little war dialer for yourself, War Games, Matthew Broderick movie, check it out. You could place one phone number on 1,000 digital pagers, and it would take about, you could do 5 a minute, so 3 hours-ish, give or take. Sometimes there would be a delay or whatever. So about 3, maybe 3.5 hours. I seem to recall that number floating around. A human distributed denial of service for the owner of the target phone number. So if I put your phone number on 1,000 digital pagers, it would do it by, as it's dialing, it's doing it on its own. So I'm not going to say we did this, but we could have gone to the mall, Metro Center, and we could have looked in from the mall into the McDonald's and watched the managers hovering over the phone, if we knew where the phone was, because we did work there, waiting for it to ring again. And we might even have called the number from a payphone ourselves and said, hi, I was paged from this number, and listened to their frustration and angst. Somebody's playing a trick on us. So it was a great way to do some distributed prank calling, if you will. That was fun. And it turns out once you get a digital page and you call a number and it's busy, you call again. And again, and again. So it had a lingering effect. I think 1,000 numbers would essentially block a phone number for practical uses for 4 days-ish, give or take, if I had ever done that, with free Sprint codes perhaps. But same thing. Not same thing. the pager companies, PageNet, whatever, you call and say, hey, I got a page from a number. Do you ever keep track of the calling thing? They're like, no, there's too many. We can't, sorry, etc. So yeah, the infrastructure was not in place. Of course, today, snap your fingers and you know everything about the person trying to call you. Stupid internet. So being online versus not. So being online was fun, but the notion of being online all the time was somewhat foreign in those early days. And so when I say early days, I'm talking late 80s, 85, 87, early 90s, definitely late 80s. Being online, just not something you would imagine being constantly, especially if, maybe at work, maybe in the workplace. And if you were a consumer of Byte magazine, as I was, there was all manner of discussion about, the PC, the IBM PC, and the different applications, the TSRs, terminate and stay resident programs, and the spreadsheets as they were coming online, and all the work you could accomplish at work, and then messaging and moving files around with your modems, your Hayes 2400 baud modems. So workplace was a thing, and certainly, being online at work, or as I would discover soon enough in an academic environment at schools, being online was all the time, was more in the realm of possibility. When I say all the time, I mean, if you're sitting at your computer, you could be online, no phone lines to interrupt and deal with. There were those with a second and even more phone lines who could do such things if they really wanted to at home, but or in a smaller workplace. But for the casual nerdle, we dial in, we post, we read, we upload, we download, and we'd hang up, get on with our day. So unless there was a full-time need or some unusual dedication to being online, or at least in front of a computer all the time, there was a sort of built-in notion of what's known as AFK, or away from keyboard. So you would just get up and move around. You would, as I did so often, go to a user group meeting, or the library, or school, or later work, McDonald's, or whatever. So there was no always connected notion. When you stepped away from the computer, you were literally away from your keyboard, and thus essentially gone, right, from an online world perspective. I mentioned the SIGs, of course, special interest groups. There were also reasons to meet up IRL, in real life. So it could be a special interest group or a club or other kinds of meetups that were on the table, right? And sometimes they would use these newfangled computers. So under the SIG umbrella as a generic term, didn't have to be computer nerds meeting up. It could be anybody. And coordinating these things with computer technology was becoming, certainly for the leading edge early adopters, becoming a thing. But generally speaking, you could meet in real life. And so you were not bound, limited to, constrained by the online tools, which were fairly rudimentary by today's standards. They were absolutely anachronistic. What? Text only? And I mean, pagers were a thing, but you could chat with people, and those were also texts. You were just typing words. Like, I can't do pictures, so you can do a semicolon and a parentheses as a smiley, right? So very early days, but there were early adopters, and you could do these discussions online, but you could also meet in real life, IRL, and your online interactions could connect with in-person engagement. So if I was communicating with someone in the Arizona Apple user group, BBS, if I left a message or, hey, I got the Amber monitor chip for the timings for my monitor, works great, thanks to, I can't remember his name, whatever. So you could give a little plug, give a little shout out to another member who came through on a promise or a statement. You would see those people in real life at the meetings, right? So there was a little bit tighter loop between interacting online and interacting in real life. Of course, this would start to change. So if you were on a BBS, it was almost certainly a local group, a local club. As you're dialing into somebody's using their second or third phone line, you could dial in, hey, only call between 10 p.m. and 3 a.m. or something, right? So very, very homegrown, grassroots, bottom up. So people taking the initiative, using their own resources, being a part of a quote unquote community. So these were all good things. And it kept there was almost like a self-policing notion, right? Like, I'm going to see all these people, so I don't really want to go too far off the rails. No anonymous flaming of people, no trolling with awful, you just get booted off. Like, you're stirring up trouble, bud. Go somewhere else. Certainly, at no time in my visits to the Atom 2 and later Arizona Apple Users Group, as a 14-year-old, at no time was I concerned in the slightest that I would be getting creepy messages or, hey, you need a ride home. None of that was happening because everybody knew each other. There was you could say today it was a safe space. So in real life was a kind of a part of the deal. And there were times, and they would have occasionally the AAUG would have like a vendor convention of sorts. And I met people from other companies that were selling software for the Apple platform, early Mac platform days, and very interesting. So we had this root of a special interest group with local connectivity, local engagement with other people. You communicate digitally, or the old way is an analog. And then we'd have people visiting from other places. And now you had the possibility of connecting with people from other places that you had met in person. So that was a little bit more interesting than just sending a message on a BBS in another city or a company BBS or things. So there was that human connection that was still maintained in real life. So often that goes away. And by the way, speaking of in real life and meet first, MEET, I had a very strict policy for most of the time that I was using LinkedIn. I would only connect with people I had met or worked with in person. And the moment I slipped on that, the moment I was like, well, we both know the same person, so sure. Now I don't even know most of the people that I'm still connected to on LinkedIn. Most is a strong term, but a chunk of the however many thousands of, it's not 10,000, I think it's something like 3,000. I've pruned my network over the years for various reasons, but the people that I connect with now, I probably don't know. I've never met them, certainly, or maybe once, maybe. So in real life, something that has lost some of its luster, perhaps, over the years. The workplace coming home was certainly a thing, and my workplace where I got started was actually academia. So my first exposure to always-on, very fast internet connectivity was in college, which is probably true for a lot of people. If you were a casual internet adopter, that's probably where you got your first dose of I can download big files. I can communicate with a lot of people. This is back in the days of Finger. So you could finger, which sounds awful, but in context, you could finger a username at another school, or you could finger another school's computer, and it would tell you who's online. You could finger individual people, and it would give you their profile information, like, oh, D. Hugo is Dan Hugo at Harvey Mudd College. So it would read you the plan file essentially, office phone number, plan, right? I am an undergraduate student at Harvey Mudd College, whatever it said. So you could reach out to people, find your high school classmates. Oh, I think a friend of mine went to Brown, and another one went to USC or whatever. So you could reach out to these schools, and they started putting more and more access to their systems in this context online. So you could actually communicate with your fellow students. So you could use chat programs. You could certainly send an email. And so suddenly, we're using the internets back in the late 80s. Now, the internet was formed before this. We actually were at the tail end of using bitnet addresses. Before the internet, there were different sort of flavors of networking and addressing and so on. So we literally had bitnet addresses for some things at Harvey Mudd, so exclamation points all over the place. But we did get in on the internet fairly early. We all Harvey Mudd students had a VAX account on HMC VAX. So if you'll remember Digital Equipment Corporation, before Compaq did their thing, we ran VMS. It was not quite a mainframe, but certainly a big computer. And I mean, I think they probably called it a mainframe, but it wasn't like today's mainframes are probably justly called big iron. But the VAX was, everybody had their account on the VAX. It's where you could email dhugo@hmc.edu. That's where it would go. And then you could, we would do our homework, our computer science CS5 class, Pascal. So I was right at home. Ooh, Vax, Pascal, I can see. I'm already ahead of the game. So I would eventually, I think it was my sophomore year of college, I got a job, a work-study job at the computer science department, not computing services. That was the HMC VAX, but the computer science department had a sequent symmetry, a sequent balance initially, and sequent symmetry. I've talked about this previously. So the sequent symmetry machine was running a parallel Unix, which sounds funny because it's multitasking already, but it was a multiprocessor Unix that Sequent had developed. And I want to say it was Dynix. I don't think it was Ultrix. I think it was Dynix. I've talked about this previously, so I already looked all this up, so I'll leave it at that. But my first exposure to a Unix environment, we could go and use the Sun workstations, Spark stations, and we could receive email at our J. Arthur address. J. Arthur Campbell, a famous Harvey Mudd professor. So jarthur.hmc.edu. You could email for a time. You could email me there. So that was very educational. VMS is a good thing to have some experience with. So is most things, punch cards, whatever. So once the ability to share information, though, discuss in real time with early chat services, like I mentioned, publishing articles, and worse, publishing whatever you were publishing via Usenet News, which was the early days of decentrally peered information sharing. It was sort of like an emailing list, but using the network news transfer protocol. And most schools were sharing, called peering. So if you posted to a news group locally, that news group was actually peered, so it'd be shared among other peers, other peer servers, so that I could post to CompSys VMS Pascal, and it would be shared amongst all the peering servers. And so eventually someone on the other side of the world could read my post about Pascal on a VMS machine and could respond if they wanted to. So the very, very early days of decentralized communications, I believe Usenet was launched in 1983. So all of these things have been around, and whenever they get relaunched as a brilliant, innovative idea, somebody somewhere needs to say, wait a minute, I think I used this in 1983. So most, the news feed on Facebook and similar, forums are kind of they're definitely related to news groups. So anything forum, BB forums, Reddit, any of these, Deja News was actually a web front end for Usenet news groups that Google acquired, turned into Google Groups, and then kind of killed off. So that was unfortunate. But the notion of being able to communicate with people anywhere on the world thanks to this internet using a variety of means, even moving very large attachments as UU encoded data, later MIME data, multi-part internet mail extension. So you could use MIME structures in messaging, share stuff all over the world fairly easily. And so these have all been around. Slack. Ooh, Slack is so cool. Yeah, it's IRC with a web front end. Internet relay chat for the win. So once the ability to share information, discuss in real time, days with the chat service, publishing articles, and worse if I use Usenet News, the possibilities seemed nearly endless. And this was still very early. This was still in Usenet in 1983. I'm sitting in front of a Spark station doing whatever I was doing when I was 19, I think. That sounds about right. So a long time ago, these are the early days, but we're still we have at our disposal ridiculous amounts of connectivity and communication capabilities. Once we were using these tools with this level of connectivity, both transfer speed and reliability and consistency of connection, you're just always on. And by the way, we did have, I want to say we had fiber. We certainly had some sort of cable running out to all of our dorms from the computing services department. So every dorm room had twisted pair running into it. And I've said previously, we didn't have a really good phone system at Harvey Mudd in my first 2 years, I think it was. getting a dial tone on a phone in your dorm room was an adventure, much less being able to call into it through a switchboard with an actual person. Think about that. But you could make use of the twisted pair serial port that was running to each room. And then you could run slip, or more likely slurp, on your computer in your dorm room, and you'd have an actual IP address. Oh, Amazon, stop doing that. So you could run these things in your dorm room and you're all set. So you're online all the time. And so even though you couldn't use your phone line, I know my parents took to using AIM. They were early adopters of AOL Instant Messenger and AOL in general. I think my dad still has an AOL email address for some reason. But yeah, so using AIM chat was a way to get around the switchboard problem. And so there you go. So communication was brought home in some ways with initial exposure at school and in the workplace. Yeah, once we were using all these, and so you either started off at school or work or both, and then you're, maybe you're communicating with people back home, so they got to get in there somehow. Bringing it all home made perfect sense. So we had experienced the future out there, and we all wanted it in here at home, and of course all the time. So I'll skip over the continuing evolution. I've talked about my time in various companies. I was in Silicon Valley from when I graduated in 1993 until 2001, and then 2005 until 2013. So a lot of evolution of cellular communication, deployment of DSL, digital subscriber line, and cable modems, and fiber, and now we have satellite internet. And so there's all manner of keeping people online. It's like a continuous drug dealer, always available to deliver what you need. So I've gone into detail about some of my time at Netscape in there. That's when I got our first DSL. No, I'm sorry. When did I get our DSL? Came later. I wanted DSL. Yes. I was at Netscape, and I had built my first computer, my first Pentium Pro, dual Pentium Pro Linux desktop machine, and I had a big giant monitor from Supermac. So I got 21-inch enormous cathode ray tube and a 28.8 kilobit per second USR modem. So I used to download files onto a zip drive. Remember those? Onto a zip drive at Netscape, where I had a Compact Desk Pro running Debian Linux. So I'd download all my packages and stuff and then go home and I would update my computer. So I would basically be shuttling SneakerNet files that would take forever to download over my modem at home. I would bring them home from work. So here again, like, it'd be so much more convenient to have this at home in Sunnyvale, California. So I left Netscape to go work at a startup called UMax. My college roommate Kevin would move up to the Bay Area from the LA area to work at UMax as well. We were living in a house together, big house, a lot of rent. And we were in the pilot area for the, not necessarily Sunnyvale, but within the service area of whatever the central office was, to receive digital subscriber line service very early. So once we switched over to DSL, kind of life-changing, to have your computer always online, to have 384 kilobit per second download speeds, and we had symmetric, so same upload speeds. Kind of not life-changing, but certainly changed the way we use these resources. Now they're always available. So I was sitting at Stoddard's in downtown Sunnyvale one night, and a colleague, Bill, totally spacing on his last name, can't remember. Bill, he used to work at NVIDIA, did really well, retired. Bill walks in, sits at the table, and pulls out his Palm Pilot 7 with the wireless radio thing attached with the little weird plastic fold-out antenna. Like, oh my God, what is that? How does it work? And these were the very early days of the web. So the notion of a mobile web browser was a little rough, but you could access some things online. Even before all this, the Apple Link was a weird, sort of very siloed information sharing platform that was used by Apple and peripheral vendors. So at Supermac, we all had to use Apple Link to get the latest whatever about the Apple platforms that we were building for. So yeah, these were the very early days. QuickTime video. Everybody thought QuickTime video meant, oh, you mean like a little 160 square pixel, teeny tiny thumbnail? No. The QuickTime is the video compression platform, but it became synonymous with the little teeny tiny choppy video that you could actually share online because it was barely any bandwidth and so on. So the very early days, I don't even know if they used motion JPEG for that back then. I would later work at True Vision on the Targa 2000 platform, which was all about that stuff. As Uncle Ben told us many times, with great power comes great responsibility. And as larger and larger swaths of the population were gaining full-time, high-speed, and nearly free, I mean, essentially, when you think about it, basically free. And in fact, really, for the amount of personal information people give up all the time, location, buying habits, everything, it should be free. It should be paid for by the likes of Google and Walmart and so on, Amazon. We had full-time, high-speed, nearly free, essentially free access to the globe by this newfangled internet thing. So disaster is only a matter of time if you give people enough rope to tie knots all day. So where those early days were often about collaboration and outreach, remember I was saying we were chatting with people. We were finding our classmates at other schools. You could share information, articles, ask questions on Usenet. There were all manner of, like I said, CompSys, programming languages, platforms. When my sweet mate Bill and I were doing our robot project, he reached out on Usenet to see if anybody had some reasonably priced tools for the Motorola microcontroller lines, the 6807. I think he got one of those somewhere. We were using the 68HC11. Different story, different time. But the ability to reach out to people, to communicate, to share information, to ask questions, to get answers, and everything was kind of the underpinning. I mean, that's why I think it started as ARPANET or DARPANET, but I think it was ARPANET, then DARPANET, BitNet, OtherNet, whatever net, eventually all congealed into the internet. But it was really about sharing information. There was really no dopamine involved, very little anyway, unless you're looking at all binaries. That may be something else. So, we were collaborating, and there was about outreach and connecting and communicating and so on. Some gee whiz sharing of news and photos, and maybe even some video now and then for the high-speed connections. And very early days, these were the early days of what you could call social networking, but the very early days of social networking themselves were where we might find old friends and classmates, and then the root of we can monetize this nostalgia, this need for connection, this need to reconnect with people, and then we can make it salacious. So connecting with colleagues, thanks to the initial LinkedIn, was cool. It was a great thing. I was a big fan of LinkedIn because Silicon Valley, especially, people were moving around so quickly, myself included, that figuring out where a former colleague was today was essentially impossible. Oh, I have his email address, or I have her email address from 3 companies ago. That doesn't help anybody. So now the ability to publish what was essentially a live business card was wonderful. And unfortunately, LinkedIn has turned into one of the worst platforms on the planet under the guise of professional, blah, 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 whatever. All manner of Facebookery going on there. But anyway, this notion of remaining connected in a workplace or professional context, sharing information, comparing notes, reading news, literally. The program to access Usenet was RN, Read News. Now we must always be looking for scams, spam, predatory behavior, propaganda, and of course, distraction and consumption of boredom. Let me reemphasize that. And of course, distraction and consumption of boredom, which might otherwise go to creativity and innovation. So I think I've talked about this previously. People are no longer bored. I'm bored. I'm going to pull up my phone and flip through TikTok all day. Back in the old days, it was, I'm bored. I will invent calculus. I'm bored. I will invent the transistor, but still be a jerk. Shockley. I'm bored. I will start a business. I'm bored. I will invent a new thing. I'm bored. I will observe the universe through this tube that I built with pieces of glass at either end. So boredom has been a strong motivator over hundreds or thousands of years, but it's been turned into a monetizable resource that can be used to hold your attention and yield nothing in return. Oh, did you see that funny meme? Yeah. Did you start a business? No, but I saw the meme. So yeah, that obviously I've editorialized the whole notion, but I have thoughts. So my take on this, being online as much as I have been for this long. So if we argue I was 15. I was 15 when I got my first modem. I think I was 15. Yeah. So that's like almost 40 years being online in one way or another. 40 years. That's crazy. So my take, I use the internet continuously. Most, if not all of my career path, so certainly since 1993, was a part of this technology space, either directly or indirectly. And I have been an all-in adopter of the technology and applications since before I had my first modem even. So I was using whatever I could get my hands on. So it's been 40 plus years, but not plus too many. And certainly throughout time until this very moment, I'm online right now. And certainly after. Use of these tools. And so I have a funny joke, sort of, to me. My roommates, Kevin and Tuck, were sports fanatics. Kevin had all of the game consoles, so they hovered around a television all the time. When Kevin was moving to the Bay Area, so Kevin was living with Tuck's girlfriend at the time in a split master in downtown LA. Tuck was attending USC. If you know these people, great. If not, doesn't really matter. So Tuck was around. They could watch games on the weekends or whatever, right? So the TV was always there. So when Kevin was moving, it was Kevin's TV. So as the story was told, Kevin said, "Okay, I'm moving," and Tuck was as it was described, was sitting there, and he kind of wasn't really paying attention specifically. And then his head jerked up, and he said, "That means I need a TV." And he literally got up from the table or wherever they were sitting and went to Best Buy, Circuit City, wherever, and purchased a television so that there would be a continuous access to television. So I kind of have the same thing about internet connectivity. So whenever I have moved, I've always made sure there's access to some sort of stable internet service. Where I live now, I have Cox internet, residential internet. It's been fine. There's not a lot of options in the Vegas area. I really enjoyed DSL, but cable modems, Cox in particular, for example, really accelerated deployment and bandwidth options and so on. So it's been okay. Back in the old days when I had our DSL and then I had another DSL connection somewhere else that I lived, back in those days they had unblocked ports. You were just connected to the internet. So running your own web servers, mail servers, your home lab, as they call it. So self-hosting everything was super easy. Nowadays, they don't want you to do that, so they block all your ports, and you got to go through dynamic DNS to even get around any of that. Anyway, so I've been in this career path and this space for the whole time. I've been an all-in early adopter and these applications the whole time. So I have developed my opinion based on no internet to the very early days of connectivity, modems and BBSs and all the phone line limitations and the social constructs and the etiquette, even some of the ethics involved with these interactions, all the way through to today where we are, all of our social security numbers have been compromised, no matter who you are, whether you're alive or dead, because somebody misconfigured something on the internet, and people are being scammed. People are being charged money that didn't intend to be charged because of online access to financial technologies and billing services and so on. So I've been around for all this so far. Use of these tools for elevation seems reasonable. Sharing news and information such that one could check with a second and a third source for validity, perhaps. I know it's crazy. Making facts available at scale, offering tools to analyze data, which we have all these things to construct arguments based on data. You or someone you know could very easily pull crime data, immigration data, school shooting data. There's just the topics of the day. Certainly the economy, economic data, inflation rates, the difference between actual inflation versus gouging, opportunistic price increases, right? Oh, it's inflation. Or it's because all the gas stations collude on pricing and nobody calls them on it. Or why is the price of eggs in Nevada so high? Because they can. But inflation is a change in the buying power of the dollar, for example. So there's a difference between inflation that cuts everything and opportunity. Ooh, we can charge more for gasoline and rent, and we'll say that it's inflation. So these pieces of information are available online. So the internet and the access to this sorts of information could be a great combination of tools and methods and resources to find answers to real questions. Back in the Usenet days, you would post a question to someone and they would give you an answer, and you could decide if you trusted it, or there would be a discussion that would eventually either devolve into flaming each other like you're wrong, or some sort of concurrence, like agreement on what an answer might be. So there are many positive uses of all these things. You eventually be able to present a reality-based viewpoint to the masses if you're creating content, or you could consume content that was could be investigated. You could observe the sources or find some information, and all these things are online. But because the internet has become performative and a source of monetization and changing of public opinion, read any of Edward Bernays' books on propaganda and public opinion for the origin story there. Sharing media for entertainment, education, and enlightenment are also great, even including this very audio program. So if you are creating content to educate with news and facts and so on, wonderful. If you are enlightening people about new ideas and inventions or your business or how to bake a cake, that's arguably education, but it's also with a tinge of opinion, maybe making a case for don't use electric, use gas, or vice versa, whatever. And then entertainment is just straight up entertainment. Have a laugh. Over the years, especially with younger people, and especially with the age at which young people receive an always connected mobile media device, because it's getting closer to newborn at this point, there is an increase in the concern over the effects of these things on the development, well-being of this super early adopter population, right? I have actually talked about this at length as well in previous episodes, especially the Jonathan Haidt, H-A-I-D-T, Jonathan Haidt, has written a couple of books. The most recent, The Anxious Generation, I think it was. So he and many people are advocating for the removal of mobile devices from the pockets and backpacks and purses of students in school. So no phones in school. You must lock them up in a sort of a, what do you call it? Like almost like a bank bag. Like it's a radio proof, whatever, signal proof, like a Faraday cage bag. Or don't bring them to school, whatever the policy is, however they implement it. It's a kind of reactionary in my opinion. And that was my opinion when I talked about this. But people are going to certain lengths to make changes to how young people access things. So profit motives of many websites and now mobile apps and their platforms make the attention economy the most important, which is arguably the source of the issue. Facts and elevation of communities or knowledge or happiness, even something that simple, are not nearly so lucrative as those so-called dopamine hits. Get people hooked on your TikToks and feed them exactly what makes them stay forever, and they'll just keep scrolling and they'll keep making money for the platform and for the content creators. Everybody wins except for maybe one person. And there are arguments and even some data supporting this notion that exposure to these platforms in the early days of brain development have detrimental effects. This is sort of believable. I mean, I'm not doubting it, but I'm saying it's even on the surface, even qualitatively, if you expose a 10-year-old person to leaded gasoline, lead in paints, lead in pipes and water pipes, these are all, except for the leaded gasoline, these are still all possibilities today. Refined sugar could have problems. Tobacco smoke, if you're smoking when you're 10, that might have some impact on you later in life. And worse, so when you have a young person, their brain is still forming, and they're exposed to neurochemical altering substances or influences, because most influences generate a neurochemical response in your brain, right? So if you're getting a lot of adrenaline or dopamine or serotonin, these will all, if they're extreme levels. I'm not a neurochemist. I'm not a neuroscientist. Only what I've read on the internets. So since it is the constant access deemed the cause of these problems, that behavioral problems, self-esteem problems, an increase in young people taking their own lives or having other drastic mental health issues, what that leads to later in life, right? So these are all bad things. Since there's this constant access, that's been deemed the cause. And so we're seeing phones get banned in the schools, like I said. This is a bit of tossing the baby out with the bathwater, in my opinion, which is what I've described already in a previous episode of this audio program. No, I might have been in the FFS Talk audio program. I'll have to build a cross-pollinated directory at some point. So it's tossing the baby out with the bathwater. I think you're trading the resources available with these tools for the perceived safety of removing access to the bad things or the risky things with these tools. So it'd be like saying cars are dangerous, therefore, not that you cannot drive a car, but you cannot be in a car until you're 18, 21. Like, wait a minute, that is throwing the baby out, literally, almost literally, not quite. But so what do? You put in a child seat, child protection devices, the seat belts. You make sure that young people are sitting in the back seat because of the statistics. The real data shows that sitting in the front seat maybe leads to more injuries, more neck injuries, more head injuries, more traffic fatalities. So now we don't have to remove the vehicle, the car, the automobile from the population or use of it by anyone under a certain age, which is also sort of questionable. Like, what's magic about 18 or 16? It should, really technically look at brain development of an individual. But, you can make some sweeping generalities for the purposes of legislation and regulation. Blah. Coming to the end, I promise. So limiting access to these devices, even though there's tons of upside, is a problem, in my opinion. We humans have grown lazy with the way that we manage or respond to. So society itself has grown lazy with unparalleled convenience that our technology developments offer us. And it's only getting worse. So, which it's the root of problems with AI, in my opinion. That's another topic for another time. But jobs, quality of life, all the things that are allegedly being placed at risk due to AI taking over, doing your work for you, and so on. In the near term, we'll see what happens. By the way, I think people are handing over everything to the promise of AI far too quickly, and there are too many people saying words like, "Ooh, if you need to generate more content, why? You just need to fill the internet with words that don't mean anything to you or to the person reading them." That's so dumb. Literally dumb. Like, profoundly stupid. And the classic American way of thinking is prohibition-based. It's based on age, in this case, until we can figure it out. And then we don't. So you can't drive until you're 16, or sometimes it's 17. Okay, where'd that number come from? Well, the actuary tables, rate of accidents, damage, the cost of the insurance companies makes that age the crossover, whatever, blah, 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 lobbyists, legislation, favoring business, the insurance business, whatever the case is. But do we ever reinvestigate? Do we ever, and I'm not saying 10-year-olds should be driving cars, but what I am saying is when these rules are set in place, they are often presumed to be correct and never really re-examined over time. So I think taking phones away is removing the platform, not the problem. And, we'll see what comes of it. I mean, no, you'll have to pry my phone from my whatever. Yeah, As with most things, we need to be aware of what we have at our disposal, what it is capable of, the thing, whatever it is, and consider not only ourselves, but those within the blast radius of whatever it is. Right? What happens to the people around me with this thing? Mobile phone, tablet, firearm, exploding package with glitter in it, whatever it is. Like any technology, from fire to firearms to automobiles to aircraft to satellites to the internets to AI and whatever is coming next, we are only getting further and farther out over our skis. If you don't understand, okay, there was a time when if you got a car, you had to understand how a car worked. If you have fire at your disposal, back in the way old days, like when my grandmother was around, when she was a kid, you're living in a cave, you got the fire, you got to know things like, oh, it's going to burn people. And if you set the fire, the fire down on our clothing that we've somehow made from animal skins or whatever, no, if you put it down on the dry leaves, more likely, I don't think leather is quite as flammable. You could burn our whole home down. So you learn these things like, oh, this is how fire works. Fire is not simple, but it is not complex. It's fairly straightforward. You can learn the rules. Learning how a car works back in the Volkswagen Bug days, pretty doable. The people's vehicle could be maintained by its owner or by a neighbor. You can learn how things work. You could do your own tunings and timings and replacing and so on. Very, very easy to deal with. But the less we understand about the things on which we depend, the more likely we are to be taken advantage of in some way by those things. And I think that is a tremendous problem, getting far worse. So we're out over our skis. We don't know what we don't know, much less what we do know. We don't know what we do know. No, we don't know the things that we're supposed to know, but we also don't know the things that we are not aware of as a population. Do you know how AI works? Do you know what the leaking possibilities are of your, whatever you type into it, being a part of somebody else's response, etc.? The less you understand about what these things do, whatever they are, and what these things might do to you on top of their real and perceived utility, right? So the side effects, so often unrecognized or unappreciated, the more likely you will play a role in some unintended consequences for someone else. So think about that. That's all I have for today. Being online used to be a simple gee whiz. Ooh, this is so cool. I can talk to my friends. I can read an article and I can ask a question. All these simple things that you can still do today, but they're hidden behind vitriol and trolling and predatory behavior and all that. And I've already done an episode on this. There was a person here in Vegas during the Downtown Project days who was an online predator, and he was arrested for various crimes against a 14-year-old girl, and he's supposedly doing 30 years in prison. I don't know if he's still alive even. But, you encounter these people, and they use the tools against vulnerable people. So that's a hopefully unintended consequence of all this. We should all understand what we have at our disposal and put it to better use than the silliness that we are mostly using it for. I'm all for interesting YouTubers and even a TikToker or a Instagram reel, whatever those people are called. Instagrammer, I don't know. Making fun, entertaining, creative. The cooking stuff is very interesting sometimes. But when that becomes the only reason people are interested, when they're not seeking out information, when they're not seeking out, improving their own understanding of things, finding new bits and pieces of knowledge to add to their collection, when we prefer the dopamine hit, the mindless entertainment, the return to absolute worthless filling of boredom time, rather than developing new ideas, taking advantage of these tools in useful and community elevating, if you like, ways, I think we're all missing out. That is where I will leave it. Today was kind of a bummer, perhaps, but we can do better. Thank you, and I will catch you later. Don't forget, buymeacoffee.com/DanHugo, Ko-fi.com, ko-fi.com/DanHugo, to find my other productions. I've referred to some previous shows. There are, 260, I think, episodes across the 4 different programs that you can peruse on Spotify and elsewhere. I need to add more of the elsewhere. I need to add more places. But my voice is telling me we're done, so have a good one. Thank you for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.